just wanted to make sure that was going.
Okay. Joe Kelly.
Not everybody has their video on.
Yeah. Who's missing? Chris missing?
So we've got Chris, Frank, Jim.
And John Baker's on.
Yep. Wheel, Kleiman, Marta, Rodney, Tom are all joining us this afternoon.
Good.
So welcome everybody.
Yeah, welcome everybody, is right.
So it is 1:32 and we have a guest
Okay.
from Coral Gables, so.
Well, BJ. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started here in just a minute. And press joined us, that's good. And Betsy's on, that's good. And you said Chris is on, I didn't see him.
Yep, video is just not on for Chris, Frank, Jim, Joe,
And John.
so,
Okay,
but they are here.
Okay,
So
great.
you are good to go at
so
any
we have
time.
everybody. Okay, good afternoon, and today is February the 22nd, and we're here for the continuation of the Lewis Executive Committee on Resiliency. And Jen is here from IPA, and just so everybody's aware, Phil has had a baby daughter. This is the last time we met, and so he may be a few minutes late in joining us, but he's with us. And so looks like the entire committee is here. Some of you have your video on, and some of you are either connected by just phone or you haven't put your video on. So if you'd like to join with your video, please do. Today, Jen has, do we want to do a roll call, Jen?
I got it.
I think we got everybody.
Yeah.
I think we have everybody, right? The only person I didn't see was Drew, and maybe
Yeah.
he hasn't joined us yet, but,
Okay.
okay.
All right.
Well, I'm going to say thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon and for accommodating the time change in our meeting today. That's to all of you, as well as to our friends from Coral Gables who have joined us. At the last meeting, we wrapped up the real estate disclosure framework, and so we are moving into the Resiliency Fund discussion, and we are going to open this up by looking at other models. Today we have some guest speakers from the city of Coral Gables, Florida. We have Matt Anderson and Keith Kleiman, who are going to give us a brief overview of that city's Resiliency Fund. And I know, knowing this committee, we could probably keep them answering questions for the entirety of our hour and a half, but we do have an agenda, and they have been graciously given us a portion of their busy days, and so we're going to keep this section of it into a maximum of 45 minutes. And then the second section of the meeting today will be a more general discussion of what we think the appropriate revenue sources are for a potential city of Lewis Resiliency Fund. And so we'll go from there. And then Janelle, if I can be able to share my screen, I have some slides for them to go through.
Okay.
So Matt and Keith, thank you for being here, and take it away.
Thank you, Jennifer, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all. Thank you for the invite to the meeting. We're excited to be here and present a little bit on give you a little background on our city, and it's a very, very brief presentation, and then a little more background on our Sea Level Rise fund that we established a few years ago. So I'll start off by introducing myself, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague, Keith Kleiman. I'm Matt Anderson. I'm the Resiliency and Sustainability Manager with the City of Coral Gables. I've been with the city for a little over 7 years now, managing the environmental initiatives for the city, anything from climate adaptation and mitigation, to recycling, to energy efficiency, water efficiency, pretty much anything that falls under that umbrella, and work really, really closely across all of our city departments, including with our finance team, which Keith Kleiman is our assistant director. So I'll turn it over to him to introduce himself, and then we can go right into the presentation.
Thank you.
Hi, I am the Assistant Finance Director for Management, Budget, and Compliance. Resiliency is just in my nature, so honestly, when Matt started his work here, I sort of looked at ways that I could help as the entitled Budget Director for the city. And though some of the ideas came to me, honestly, at 2 a.m. in the morning as a wake-up, just red light. But we've worked well together, and he has to deal with the commission. He has to deal with the residents. I get to hide behind my desk and just come up with ways of funding it all. But we work well together, and we're here to help you in any which way we can.
Yeah.
So real briefly, we just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about how we in Coral Gables are building a more sustainable and resilient city. So a little background on us, if you're not aware of the city of Coral Gables, we are right in the middle of Miami-Dade County. We were founded in 1925. We were actually one of the first planned cities in the United States. We cover about 37 square miles. About 14 of that is on land. The rest of it is there in Biscayne Bay. We are a full-service city. We provide our own police, fire, and sanitation collection services. We have about 50,000 residents with a little over 8,000 businesses. One of the things we're most known for is our tree coverage. We have about 45% tree coverage in our city, one of the highest in South Florida. And we've been Tree City USA for over 36 years. Our elevation, as you can imagine, in South Florida is relatively at sea level. We do have some areas in the city that are 22 feet above sea level, kind of along a ridge within the middle of our city. But most of our city is very, very vulnerable, as is the rest of South Florida when it comes to talking about sea level rise, the impacts of climate change. And so that is why it has been resiliency in general has just been a really big focus of ours here in our city. It's been a priority adopted by our city commission, by our city administration, and is being built into all of our city services and the policies that we enact as a city. We are also, I'll do credit to Keith and his team, one of only 3 cities in the state of Florida that have a AAA bond rating. And a large portion of that is due to all the resiliency efforts we've been able to implement. And the one in particular that we're here to talk to you guys a little bit about today is our Resiliency Fund. So Jen, if you can go to the next slide, please. This Resiliency Fund we established during fiscal year 2016-2017, and it was basically looking at how we were going to fund or start planning for the future when it comes to dealing with sea level rise and how we were going to fund that. So what we did is we were able to create this fund that basically takes stormwater fees and does slight increases year over year to the ERU. And the goal is to generate $100 million by the year 2040. And that'll be used to help fund future infrastructure hardening improvements that we've been looking at. I do want to point out that this does not mean we're not doing ongoing maintenance. We have a very aggressive maintenance plan when it comes to resiliency and with our equipment and with our buildings and all kinds of infrastructure within the city. This is a separate fund that we put that is not to be touched except for future resiliency efforts. And we started this fund, like I said, in fiscal year 2017, and it started accumulating with very, very slight increases to our ERU. And with the goal of by 2026, fiscal year 2026, collecting $5 million a year from this fund. And then, like I said, going all the way out to 2040, collecting $100 million. Now, $100 million sounds like a lot of money, but as you guys have probably been discussing, it's really a drop in the bucket when it comes to funding resiliency. We know it's going to be a very expensive endeavor. We know cities all across the country are going to be looking at funding to be able to make their cities more resilient. So we thought, very forward thinking on behalf of our city and our commission to start looking at years down the road and being able to start setting aside funding now to be able to allocate toward those resiliency efforts, whether it be applying for federal grants, whether it be projects themselves, state money. We wanted to be able to have what we're calling kind of seed money to be able to then allocate and put toward, matching funds if they're needed to deal with implementing these resiliency efforts. So I know there's a lot of information on this spreadsheet, and we could definitely go into more detail about this with you all and answer any questions. But this is the plan we put forward, and it's been fully supported by our residents, our business community, our city commission, and our city administration. And a lot of cities down here in South Florida in particular, we've seen, the cost of some of our cities, neighboring cities that had to go out to bond. You guys are probably familiar with the city of Miami Beach and the city of Miami. City of Miami Beach, I believe, had to go out to $400 million for their initial bond. And the city of Miami with their Miami Forever bond, that was $200 million that was allocated toward resiliency. So we realized that this is just a start, but we wanted to get started now and years prior to be able to then start looking in the future when it comes to implementing resiliency. So I'll stop there. I'll turn it over to Keith in case he has anything else to add. And if not, we can certainly dive into this even more with you all and answer any questions that you all have as a group.
Well, Matt, I think you covered it. I'm here for questions. If anybody has and needs any more detail, we can go into it. If you want to go over the spreadsheet, we can.
Any invoice they've received.
Why don't you just do a basic review of the spreadsheet, particularly for some of our non-engineering and municipal people, what an ERU is and kind of what the base and why you decided to go with the stormwater fee as your resiliency fee.
Okay, why don't we tackle that first? So we associate sea level rise with stormwater. I mean, we really find that there is going to be one and the same because the runoff going in and things and during storms and with the high tides and stuff like that, it's all sort of tied together. So we looked at it that way as the first thought, but then we sort of cemented the thought by saying that the stormwater system charges every property in the city. We have one ERU per residential unit for residential property, and then we charge multiple ERUs for commercial property based on their square footage. So it's just a way that everybody participates on as equal a basis as we can. Now, we already had ERUs in place prior to the start of this fund. The ERU that was in place already supports the ongoing maintenance of our stormwater system. The ERU shown on the sheet are incremental changes to that ERU each year to generate the funds to accumulate the $100 million. Now, just as an aside, that $100 million is pure principal as collected. We are actually investing it, and it should be considerably more than $100 million by 2040. So we're showing parts of it right now. You can see some of the actuals are on the right side of the spreadsheet. FY21 is being closed out right now, so that number is being calculated. So basically, for the sake of the viewers, we sort of look at more of the midsection of the spreadsheet. And if you take a look at the very top row, just to walk you through it quickly, year one, this is where we were getting a little more aggressive. We toned it down after that. We wanted to start off with a incremental increase of $1 million. Okay, the ERU was $8.80. It looks like we did a larger increase that 1 year, $3.09. It brought it up to 11.09. The annual accumulation would have been $1 million, and the total accumulation, because it was the start of the plan, was $1 million. And as you can see over to the right, the actual that year came in at 990. Okay, now starting in the second year, this is where we really started to go to the commission, sell the process a little bit more. We decided to go as a 10-year plan, and we cut the incremental accumulation down to $445,000 each year. It was a much more modest increase to the ERU, and as you can see how it starts accumulating. Now, the increase is a 10-year plan. It's a modest increase until the year 2026. At that point, we will be accumulating just over $5 million a year. And then the plan is to stop the increase at that point and just still accumulate that $5 million. Again, it's incremental above the regular operating budget, but that $5 million will go to the fund. And in the year 2040, we project about $100 million of pure principal. Obviously, interest on top of that. Any questions so far?
Marta, go ahead.
Just about the ERU, I looked it up because I didn't know what it meant, and it's an equivalent residential unit, but was it 8 for all houses or residential, and then the commercial was higher, or what?
Yes, for each residential, a dwelling unit, it was $8 for the first year. It was $8.80, it looks like. I can't really read the screen very well. Yes, but for commercial, the ERUs are calculated by dividing the total square footage of impervious surface by 2,346 square feet, which is considered one ERU. So if a business has 3 or 4 times that, they be charged 3 or 4 times the ERU for during each month on the bill.
Thank you.
So if I can follow up on Marta's question on ERU. So you charge every resident 1 ERU regardless of the lot coverage, permeability, or runoff or size of the lot?
Yes.
That one?
Yes, on a residential side, yes. On the business, as I said, it's based on square footage.
Right, yeah, staying strict on the residential. And in Coral Gables, are most lots uniform in size, or are there tremendous differences in size?
No, there are tremendous differences. We have, some small lots by the coast. We have some very, very large lots. Basically, that's some of the bulk of the property down there on the very wealthy part of town. They're much larger.
And was there much discussion about the equity issue between using ERU?
To tell you the truth, I've been here 12 years. The ERU process, that structure, was started way back when the fund was started. It's way before my time, so I really don't have that answer. We have never had any questioning of it in the 12 years I had been with the city.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
And I also wanted to mention too, while we were talking about property, one thing that makes us different in our city too, we don't have any beachfront property within our city. And then also too, the vast majority of our coastline is single family residential outside of the southern part of our city, which has mixed, whether it be county parks and land or state preservation areas. So I wanted to add that to the conversation as far as how, our city is situated with regards to landmass.
Marta, I see you have a follow-up question.
Yes. So to follow up on Tom's input there, did the city ever consider changing the amount each resident would pay depending on their lot coverage, for instance, because it would be an incentive to reduce lot coverage, wouldn't it?
Again, to my knowledge, there's never been any question on the current ERU structure. It's been very steady, so that's, again, one of the reasons why we chose it, is everybody's participating. And honestly, everybody was very, very happy with the way we're implementing this plan. As far as any feedback I've gotten, and it's usually through Matt or the commission, everybody's very much on board with the way we're doing this.
And this is part, and like I said, I didn't touch upon it in this presentation, but it's part of our overall resiliency efforts. Our city has done a lot of other resiliency initiatives, from a community-wide vulnerability assessment, looking at all of our critical infrastructure in our city, and projecting out to the impacts of sea level rise, storm surge, hurricanes, even king tides, which we see here in South Florida. So our city has really been and made resiliency and sustainability a high priority. And a lot of these initiatives, including establishing this fund, have been fully supported by our administration and our community partners, and also our residents and our businesses.
There was a question in the Q&A that the 880, so for instance, in row 1, the 880 and then proposed ERU is 1189. That's a monthly cost, correct? Not an annual fee.
Yes, that's monthly.
That is
And also, you can take a look, even if you head all the way down to the bottom to 2026, it's still a fairly modest amount per month for the benefit that it's bringing to the city. So even the more modest properties, it's not a big hit on their wallets for the $25 that it is in the final year of this increase.
Correct. And do you have any idea, and you said this was the stormwater fee was in place long before the sustainability. Do you have any idea when when the city actually started that or adopted that?
No, to tell you the truth, I don't. And again, I've been here 12 years and it was in place and solidly in place for years before that.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, Chris, I see you have a question.
Yeah, hi, and thanks guys for doing this. Just wondering what Coral Gables is like right now in terms of challenges that you have with high tides or with storms coming in. Like what kind of flooding issues today are you guys experiencing, if any?
Sure, Keith, I'll take the first part of that. So right now in our city, I mean, we're pretty fortunate. We're not seeing a lot of impacts of flooding like maybe some of our counterparts like Miami Beach, which routinely is seeing a lot of impacts from king tides and water being on the streets. Our most vulnerable area right now, just based on elevation, is our obviously along our coastline. And the area that floods, I would say probably the most is actually a county park within our city. It's called Matheson Hammock. And when we have high tides there's routine flooding in the parking lot and along the marina and the boat ramps there. But as far as like really high impacts of flooding throughout the northern part of our city and like our central business district area, we haven't seen huge impacts. I mean, we're in South Florida. We do see a lot of flooding just in general, but not to the effect of, there always being water on the streets or anything like that. I'll also say too, and want to touch upon it, is in South Florida, we are very unique in the fact that when it comes to our geology, we sit on limestone, which is a very porous rock. So some of the solutions that are looked at around the world and around even the country aren't necessarily solutions here for South Florida, because we could put a wall up to try to block water and water's still going to come up through the ground. So and our water table here in South Florida is continuing to rise because of sea level and climate change. So we are seeing where, water may pond for a little while longer in certain areas because of the water table being a little bit higher. But as far as just, routine flooding, we're not seeing it yet, but we do look at the projections. And here in South Florida, we have an organization that's been around, that's all the 4-county area, which is Broward, Miami-Dade, Monroe, and Palm Beach counties, that are all working together in all the cities and municipalities under the South Florida Regional Climate Compact, that actually come up with local projections based on scientific data and project all the way out to, I think now it's out as far as 2100, as far as what the impacts we could see here in South Florida as a result of sea level rise. So, as a region, we know we're kind of, along with some other areas in the United States, we're at the forefront of this as far as dealing with the impacts of climate change and sea level rise. So we have all the 4-county area and all the municipalities working together when it comes to policy, when it comes to, financing strategies, when it comes to, all the different initiatives, and along with the projections of what all of us are going by and using in our planning from our cities as far as what we need to be looking at going forward, taking into account like what NOAA is projecting and all the other organizations are as well. So I just wanted to touch on that.
And thank you very much. That was great to hear that there's a regional approach to it. And you mentioned sea level rise. Is it the group also taking into account the change in precipitation due to climate change? And given the fact that Atlas 14 isn't going to be updated, can you talk a little bit about what you're doing there?
Yeah, absolutely. So it does look at, sea level rise is usually the one that we all talk about first, but absolutely, we're looking at precipitation. They're looking at that. They're even looking at, now the impacts of heat, which, is huge here in South Florida. I think City of Miami was or Miami-Dade County was one of the first places in the world that actually named a chief heat officer, which is somebody that's just in charge of looking at the impacts of heat when it comes to equity, and those impacts we're seeing from climate change as well. So yes, we are looking at all those fronts. It's just, usually sea level rise is usually one of the first ones and this organization, the South Florida Regional Climate Compact, has been around. I think we just had our 14-year anniversary as far as when it got established. So it's been around a while, and it was one of the first regional networks or regional collaborations you saw in the entire country that were working on all of this as an entity together, and it continues to do a lot of amazing work. And for cities, we're a small to medium-sized city here in South Florida. So for cities like us and cities that are even smaller, it's such a great organization to be a part of because it gives us a seat at the table when it comes to the regional conversations, when it comes to dealing with these impacts and what we're doing as a region and working together. So can't speak enough to the value it adds to us as a city and being part of those regional discussions.
Great, okay. We have another quick question from the Q&A, and then we'll get to Joe. We'll take your question. I think this one will be pretty easy. It's, would a condo unit be charged by individual ERU, and assuming the fee, and also I'm assuming the fee covers both capital and the operations budget?
Yes, the residential ERU is for per dwelling unit. Okay, so if it's a multifamily dwelling, even if it's a rental of, let's say, 4 units, it would be four ERUs, one per. So a condo would be treated the same way. The fee, so if you bring back that chart, it was $8.80 to start with when we started the program. That $8.80 was funding the operating side of the budget. Now that $8.80 is still there. Everything above it is going to the sea level rise. But if we decided that we needed more operating dollars, we would approach the commission separately for an incremental change to the ERU that would fund the operating budget.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, Joe, you want to go ahead?
Yes, have you seen any beach erosion in Coral Gables? If so, is any of this money potentially available to deal with that issue?
So that's a very good question. In Coral Gables, we don't have any beachfront. We don't have any beaches in our city. Our coastline is vastly made up of single-family residents, and then also state and county preservation areas with large expanses of like mangroves, which are obviously helping us in this situation as well when it comes to coastal erosion and storm surge. So we don't manage any beaches in our city. So that might be a question that, maybe the City of Miami or the City of Miami Beach, which obviously has world-renowned beaches within their jurisdiction, could answer. And I think they even have separate beach renourishment programs that look at helping fund that. And then I think they also go for state funding on that. So, but within our city, we don't have any beaches that we manage within our own jurisdiction.
Thanks, Matt. Does anyone else have another question or follow-up for the committee? I saw Rodney and then Marta.
Thank you. You said early on you had 45% tree coverage in Coral Gables.
Yes.
Is that because it was forested to begin with, or do you have an aggressive tree planting program, or how do you achieve that?
Sure. So we have kind of both. I mean, when we were going back to when we said we were one of the first planned cities, our founder George Merrick, really made it a priority to plant trees all along our city. We have a lot of probably the most abundant is live oak, and we have those throughout our entire city. But we have a very aggressive, let's say, maintenance plan with regards to our trees and also planting. I think for as far as a percentage of tree coverage, we're one of the largest here in South Florida, and that's something trees are a very, very high priority. It's like I said, one of the things our community is known for is our tree canopy, and you definitely know when you're leaving another city and driving into Coral Gables, especially our single-family residential area, because it is lined. Our trees, I wish I would have included some more pictures of what our streets look like, and it's all tree-lined streets throughout our community, which obviously help us, when it comes to resiliency for as far as capturing stormwater, reducing heat island effect in our single-family residential area. So, all the benefits that we have as trees within our city, and that's why it's such a high priority for us to maintain that tree canopy and continue to expand upon it, throughout the city.
Thank you.
My
Okay,
pleasure.
Marta, go ahead.
I was wondering, is the entire city serviced with storm sewers, or are there areas other than the parks and natural areas that don't have storm sewers, like only swales and things like that, ditches?
So we have swales throughout our city, and then a lot of it gets captured. We have, and I'm not the exact expert on this, so I might misspeak a little bit, but that we have like catch basins or what we call, I think it's French drains, that basically it gets captured in the limestone, and then it can filter through that limestone naturally, and then some do end up going out to our waterway, and kind of adding on to that discussion, another high priority of our city is dealing with water quality. So as that storm water is coming, going through the system and ending up within our waterways and into Biscayne Bay, and Biscayne Bay has been a big focus area because of large percentages of seagrass die-off over the years because of various reasons. Could be pollution, it could be just overall water quality. But so we have made it a high priority to both study our waterway from a water quality perspective, but also implement land management practices as far as reducing fertilizer use and all this other stuff that is, helping improve our water quality. And then on the kind of separate, we have sewer and septic within our city, kind of still part of the conversation, and it's about half and half as far as the number of sewer systems we have and the number of septic tanks that remain in our city, which is no different than a lot of other cities down here in South Florida that do have septic, and that's something that's also a high focus area as far as dealing with water quality, is looking at trying to convert septic over to sewer on that system. And that's something a lot of cities in this region are looking at as far, and also dealing with sea level rise as well, because as that water table continues to rise, there's obviously those impacts that can happen on a septic system. So those are things that we're looking at. We're fortunate that in our city, most of our coastline is on sewer. But there are small pockets of the communities on our coast that remain on septic that we are, actively looking at ways of trying to convert that over.
Great.
So storm sewer, I guess I meant storm sewer, are all properties covered by a storm sewer?
Yeah, the whole system, our largest outfall in our city for storm water is relatively small. I believe it's 66 inches compared to like most of your major cities here in South Florida. that I believe can go as high as like 90-inch outfalls, where all that storm water is collected. So, you know, for the most part, you know, our city, and our main outfall is captured mainly down our central business district area and then discharges out into a waterway. And now we're actually looking at converting some of that pipe system into a kind of that French drain system that I explained, where it kind of can get captured and held within the limestone, and then filtered through the system naturally, as opposed to through a pipe system. So hopefully I answered that to the best of my ability.
Thank you.
And I think you actually answered a question that's in the Q&A, which are pretty simple, I think. But stormwater is a city responsibility, not a separate water authority, correct? Or you do have? Yes, I see Keith shaking.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's part of the city. It's under the jurisdiction of the city manager. It's one, Public Works is one of the city departments.
Mm-hmm. And then the second half of that is stormwater is managed as a separate system other than the wastewater, other than sewer.
Yes, we have two utilities, sanitary sewer and stormwater.
Okay, and great. And so just a quick time check with everyone. We have about 10 minutes left. And I saw Tom and then Jim and then Joe. So go ahead, Tom.
Two quick questions. You said septic was 50-50 with sewer. Is all of Coral Gables on domestic water though, or do you have any wells?
So, I mean, I know that I don't know exactly for our residential properties, but I know that on some of our city properties, we do have wells. But as far as that goes, you know, the ones that are closer to the coastline, we are seeing in our city and mainly at our youth center, we've actually had to cap some of our wells because of saltwater intrusion. So that is an impact we're seeing as a result of sea level rise as well down here. Is we see that saltwater intrusion line, you know, it kind of goes east and west depending on the time of the year, and if it's during rainy season or dry season. I'm sure we have a lot better experts on that on this call than me. But I mean, that's one impact that we're seeing, is we are having to cap some of our wells, and we do a lot of regular testing of our wells for saltwater intrusion, because of that impact we're seeing, you know, with regards to sea level rise.
Okay, and that was just out of curiosity. I'm on the Board of Public Works. The second question is probably more pertinent to this group. Is you say that the $100 million Resiliency Fund is set aside for future resiliency. Can you describe a little bit of what you think that is going to be? Is that buying land? Is it, you know, gray structures? What do you think that is?
So right now, the goal when we decided to do the fund, the goal was to start putting money away. Coral Gables, as Matt said, is in a very unique situation, as is most of Florida, with the problem of the limestone. So right now, there are no real fixes other than even sort of temporary fixes like Miami Beach. They spent $400 million for a whole new pump system. They raised one road, Alton Road was the only road raised with $400 million, and they put pumps in. And so that is a fix that is honestly going to run out of life at some point as the water keeps going up. This is a limit. You're pumping water out and the water's coming right back in. So we're looking for this money to go toward permanent fixes. We don't know what those fixes are yet. We are looking most probably to the Army Corps of Engineers, who I know are working on items for all over the country, or the East Coast and, you know, down into the Gulf. So we're waiting on them, because right now we don't have the answer, but we are not going to touch that money for any interim fixes. There's nothing. That money is there for the future, and that's something we haven't talked about. It's really seed money, because honestly, $100 million, or let's say even $150 million, if with interest and investments by the time 2040 rolls around, that's a drop in the bucket. Honestly, it's nowhere near the amount of money we're going to need to really handle this job. So basically, we want that money to be there to match federal, state grants that become available, as well as in case we have to go out for bonds. A bonding agency is going to look at us yes, we have, triple A bond ratings, but they also can look at us because we're going to have that money, that seed money set aside. Most of the cities aren't planning ahead like that. We want to be ahead of the curve, and that's the way we sold this. We want to be ahead of the curve for that timeline.
And that's great. So what I'm hearing you say, though, is that the money's not going to be available for disaster recovery of a storm that came in.
Okay, so now we talked about this earlier today. So the city maintains a 25% operating reserve. So in our case, it's between $40 and $45 million. That does not get touched unless there is some catastrophe. We have to dip into it because, like, the last storm we had was Irma, going back to 2017. There was somewhere around $20 million worth of debris and damage done. So the city laid it out from that fund, that reserve, and then most of it is coming back to us from FEMA, the state, or our insurance policies, and any amount that we have to absorb is then taken out of annual surpluses as they come to restore the reserve to 25%. So that is for the here and now. And once again, this fund is not for emergency purposes.
Right.
It is clearly for the future, and in the fix, it's the permanent fix that we're looking for sea level rise.
Okay, thank you very much. That clarifies it.
Joe, I think you were next. And then Jim Baker, I think, was behind him.
You mentioned that the stormwater is discharged into the waterways. What waterways, and are you contemplating in the future
Biscayne Bay.
to discharging it into, for example, the ocean, or try to remove it completely from any inland waterways?
Sure. So to answer the question on waterways, we have our Gables waterway system, which when I early on in the presentation mentioned that we have 47 miles of coastline and waterways. I think like 35 miles of that 47 is actually our inland waterways that connect into South Florida water management, and that in the entire system that kind of helps, kind of drain South Florida as far as, when we have storms or tides and that sort of thing. So, and as far as discharging into our waterway, we're doing a lot of innovative pilot studies as far as the water that is ending up in our waterway, discharging into our waterway, as far as testing new technologies, whether it be smart sponge technologies and capturing nutrient runoff, to baskets that are put into our drains that capture organic matter from ending up in the waterway that may be holding excessive nutrients. So we're looking at a lot of ways, and we partner with a lot of our local universities and established a really high-level water quality assessment team. Our city is committed to studying our waterways and have allocated a lot of funding on establishing a baseline of where the nutrients are coming from in our waterways, and what we can do as far as land-based strategies to help manage those. And then also working with Miami-Dade County, who passed a countywide fertilizer ordinance that bans the use of fertilizer with nitrogen and phosphorus during our rainy season, which is our summer months. So combination of looking at at fertilizers, at existing septic tanks, and a few other entities in trying to reduce the amount of nutrients that are ending up in our waterways that then feed into Biscayne Bay, as do a lot of the municipalities down here that feed into Biscayne Bay. And like I said, there's a big focus on Biscayne Bay and restoring it with, decreasing the amount of seagrass die-off and that sort of thing. That's the impact that's having on the waterways. So our city has made that a huge priority as far as improving that water quality.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay. Jim, did you still have a question? You took your hand down, but I didn't.
Sure. Yeah, actually, Keith answered a lot of my questions that he had, or that I had, but I did have one other one. What were some of the challenges that you ran into while trying to get support for starting a fund like this? And as a follow-up, if you were to advise the city of Lewis, what are some if we were to start a fund, what are some recommendations that you would give to us?
Okay, so, the idea came to us, what we started doing going back, I think about 7 or 8 years ago, we started looking at our capital improvement plan. Basically, going back 12 years before I got here, there was little to no capital investment in the city. So when I got here in 2010, I asked that we can take over the capital plan for the city, and we started funding projects slowly. But going to about 2015, 2016, we decided it was time to start looking at comprehensive replacement programs, but different categories of assets, like roof replacements, HVAC replacements, elevator replacements, things like that. So we looked at the globe of each one, and we created a 25-year plan. It was actually based on the longest life of the most long-lived asset. And basically, it fully funds the replacement of that category of assets. Every year, we put money into the fund, and it comes from recurring revenues from our general fund, and that covers that asset category. That type of thinking is what really brought on the thought of thinking ahead for the Resiliency Fund. We wanted to say, okay, what could we do now that's going to help us plan on something for the stormwater fund for infrastructure? And we had no idea what it was going to be, as I said. So that's when the idea, and honestly, it came to me at 2 a.m. I just woke up and said, oh my God, let's put this together. I put it together. I sold it to my boss, the finance director. She automatically just bought right into it. We went to the city manager at the time, not the current city manager, and she did not. She didn't want to raise any type of fees, and she was fairly adamant. And to tell you the truth, I begged and pleaded. It wasn't pretty, but I begged and pleaded with her. I said, please let me just present it to the commission. She said yes. We presented the commission, and it was an instant sell. Unanimous, they bought into it. There was not one vote against it from any of the public, because there's always the public at the commission meetings. Nobody said anything negative, and we implemented it right away. I can't tell you other cities are going to have that kind of support. We're very fortunate. Matt and I know how good it is here. Our commission is very, very progressive. They know what they're facing. Yeah, it's a very intelligent commission. They know exactly what they're facing, and we had the support. I mean, yes, because we've been successful in some other things like our capital replacement matrices, but this sold right away, and I hope that you can do the same.
Thank you very much. Okay, we are just about, actually, we're probably a couple minutes over the time that we had allocated to this discussion, but I just want to, thank Keith and Matt very, very much for their time with us and for the example and role model that you have set being on the forefront of all of this. I think it's been really helpful for our committee. And just thank you very much for your time. If anybody has any last comments or last questions, we can probably squeeze one in, but looks like we're going to. Okay. Keith and Matt, thank you so much.
Our pleasure. And if there's any follow-up questions, we have our contact information. Jen, you have our contact information. Happy to follow up with us and assist in any way we can.
Yes, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jennifer, we will have access to the slide deck after the meeting?
Yes. I believe that stormwater table is on the public site as well. So,
Yes, if you have any questions on that, feel free to email me or Matt. Actually, probably Matt, and just he'll send it to me. I can always get it over to you.
Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great.
Okay.
Excellent presentation.
So let's take a couple minutes before we jump into the other discussion. What is everybody's reactions or takeaways from that presentation? Anything really resonate or?
I'm actually astounded that there was almost, it sounds like zero opposition or even debate over their resiliency fund. I mean, even the amount charged, I mean, you would have thought there would have been some debate about, is it too much money they're looking to raise? Should the percentage go to ERU be lower? Or to Tom's point about equity, I'm just kind of astounded by that, how seamless it was for them to implement it.
I'm not surprised about everybody was in favor of doing it, but I do wonder if there were different size lots, coverages and all that kind of thing. Nobody said anything about that, the equity thing too, but.
Yeah, he did say, you're right, it is a flat fee per residential unit, was one of the questions that we actually had for them earlier. We kind of debriefed a little bit. And they do have a wide range of lots. It sounds like that's how the fee had been established and it was working well and they just kind of rode that wave and tried to build on it a little bit. But their lot coverages, I was just out of curiosity was looked into that a little bit in their zoning ordinances. The lot coverage ranges from 45% for single family detached up to 60 to 70% for multifamily, just to have it. So with that, the rest of our meeting, which we have 35 minutes or so left in the meeting, we really wanted to focus on, kind of take that first step. The Resiliency Fund is two parts, right? Where the funding comes from and where the funding goes. And so I wanted to take the next half hour and kind of focus on that where the funding comes from question. And so we can talk a little bit about that. Tom and Jim, you have a question before we get there?
Just one last comment. I mean, what really stood out is that this $100 million resiliency fund is a hands-off bank account for future technology. It is not addressing the risks currently or being used for disaster relief. And I know in prior discussions in this panel, we've had discussions about that. So I thought that was very interesting that there's a fund in the city for disaster recovery, but this is not that fund.
Separate fund.
And this is not earmarked for any current projects. It's for technology as it becomes available to address flooding issues due to either sea level rise or precipitation.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Maintenance has its own fund, emergency has its own fund, and then this is future. Jim.
Yeah, one thing I liked about how they did their funding source was they didn't create anything new. They already had an ERU charge, and they just had a portion of a small increase on that existing ERU charge. So I don't know if the city of Lewis wants to think about that, if there is an existing fee that they're already charging, that they could create a portion of that fee, whether it's an additional one or whether it's a portion of the fee that they're already collecting to a resiliency fund.
What do other committee members think about that suggestion? Marta? You're muted, sorry.
I'd like to ask, Tom, is it $5 stormwater fee across the board right now for residents?
Yes, but I was going to clarify. So currently the Board of Public Works charges $5 per meter, per water meter but that is not a resiliency fund.
No.
That is for the maintenance of the stormwater piping as it is. So the vacuuming of storm drains, the cammering and lining of pipes. And we currently, anyone who's in the rate hearings that we had last week are reevaluating that because frankly, what we're charging or the income we're getting does not cover the costs of actually maintaining the system. Now, the Board of Public Works has a separate cash reserve for disaster preparedness, capital accounts, and so on. But that $5 fee that we charge per meter is not comparable to this Resiliency Fund account.
No, I didn't think it was, but I saw that it was only $5 and it's across the board, even when there's no storm sewers, right?
Well, yes, because it is for maintaining the entire system. And even if you don't have storm waters like on Cedar, you do have to drive through Second Avenue and the rest. So, and it's also just like theirs, it's one fee across the board per meter.
Right. Okay, thank you.
And Tom, just to clarify, that separate cash reserve, is that something that's being fed on a regular basis, or was that kind of a one-time set aside?
We feed it, and actually it's something we take into account every time we do a rate structure adjustment. And it's one of the things I think, as everyone knows, without getting off the line, the BPW is replacing water lines, sewer lines, stormwater, and electrical upgrades continuously. So we're always looking at whether we go out for bonds or increase rates to pay for, to make sure that fund is adequately kept. And we're in the middle of that process right now.
Thank you. Keena and then Joe.
There we go. I was trying to get unmute. We might have touched on this earlier when we started this discussion, and my mind will need to be refreshed. In addition to the funds that BPW has for disaster relief for their projects, what funds does the city of Lewis have set aside for our disaster relief? Do we have any? Are there any such things that are allocated for this specifically?
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to throw that to the city.
There is not currently a separate disaster relief fund. We have a mitigation planning team that is working on something like that, but there's nothing currently established.
Thank you. That's good to know.
And Joe.
Tom, what is the size of the fund that is being set aside to deal with these emergency needs? How large is that?
Well, it's a little hard to answer clearly because each utility, the electric, the water, the stormwater, the sewer, has a separate fund. And within that fund is broken down to what is required by regulation and what we feel is prudent from a preparedness. So, but if you wanted to know, approximately the totality of the cash reserves is about $13 million for everything. So not all of it will be available for every outcome. But that also covers, that cash reserve also covers for our long-term capital program. So the next 5 years of capital improvements that we're doing. So I hope that puts it in perspective, but we do have a substantial amount of money in cash reserves to protect us. Because what we consider is what would it cost if a storm came in and took out the electrical system? Because while Coral Gables is correct that FEMA will eventually reimburse you, the FEMA reimbursement cycle is 1 to 2 years. So you need to have cash on hand if you're going to be able to get contractors to come in to assist you after a disaster. And then you'll get replenished, hopefully, in a year or two, but you need to stand on your own.
Okay.
Do you consider this what Coral Gable is proposing, something separate from what the Board of Public Works is doing currently? I mean, how would they relate?
Yes, yes and no. I apologize again, once again. Because Board of Public Works, we're concerned, I mean, our scope is piping and wires. So the whole idea about the streets and, whatever infrastructure will be required because sea level rise increased, that wouldn't affect the pipes or the electrical system is not in the Board of Public Works scope domain. That's in the city. So we have kind of a split responsibility because as everyone saw after Sandy and the other ones, a lot of the damage was washout of roads underwater, loss of city services.
Thank you.
Great. So Chris, Jim, and then Keena.
Yeah, I guess this is a question for anybody who might be able to answer it, because I'm having a hard time just kind of getting my arms around some of the basic math on this as it pertains to Coral Gables. They're charging this $12, let's call it. If we were to set it up in a similar fashion, and let's say we're charging $12, I don't have a good concept of how many units is that for Lewis? Is it 12 times, if we did it like they do it, what would it be? 12 times what? How many units would we have? Does anybody know that?
Well, wouldn't it be the residential would be however many residents we have, but also commercial? Is that in there too?
They actually have two structures. They have a commercial structure, which is more, but then they have their residential structure. So,
Right.
We're probably looking at about 3,500 residential units.
And that was a monthly fee, so it would be 12 times
12 times the 35, yeah.
I didn't even catch that. So it was that was monthly.
So it's $144 a year using your $12 number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for residential, that's $500,000.
About $500,000.
Yeah.
Right.
And
then
what about?
And then you've got commercial on top of that, which is charged based upon square footage. The basic unit, most of our commercial units would probably fit into the smaller sizes, but then you've got some bigger commercial units that would have a larger fee. Because I think he was using a number like 2,500 as a base for the square footage to be 1 ERU.
And remember that they set a fundraising target by a certain date.
Right.
So they're actually having incremental increases every year,
Right.
and they've programmed that out so they get 100 million in principle by 2040.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So they started with a target rather than this is how much we think we can raise per year.
So what does our commercial square footage look like about? Anybody know?
Without sitting down and looking at it, I couldn't tell you, Marta. But I think most of the shops on downtown Lewis would fit into less than 2,500 square feet.
Anne Marie has her hand up too.
Yeah, Anne Marie.
I had gotten the sense that by square footage, they were talking about square footage of the site, not square footage of floor area.
I think it was
They said impervious surface.
Right. So again, you're looking at the footprint of improvements, not, if you've got 3 stories and 1,000 square feet on each floor, that's still just 1,000 square feet. So to me, I think that's an important difference, that it really has to do, because then it correlates directly to what your runoff is.
So when we were talking to them earlier, it was per square footage of the building. And I think they even said if there was a 2-story building, you counted each floor.
Just like they did with the condos, if there was multiple units in a condo, each condo unit counted.
That's what I heard. But
Yeah, I heard that too, Janelle. I think we
okay,
have to
I just want to make
clarify
sure, just so everybody's clear. It was one per each residential unit, and then they had a square footage of the building for commercial for an ERU, which we consider an EDU.
So I'm not sure about that because I remember in our pre-meeting, Keith said he thought that's what it was, but then he pulled up the ordinance and looked at it and read it and said impervious surface and not
Okay.
total floor area.
We'll double check.
We can verify
But
that.
we can certainly clarify that.
Okay.
That's something we can clearly clarify. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so Chris, we got you. Jim, you were up.
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of getting in the weeds a little bit, right? We're putting the cart before the horse. Like we're talking about funding, but we don't even know what we're funding. Like we have limited meetings left to come up with something. Shouldn't we be discussing what we want to fund first and then figure out if we can fund it? So, I mean, some good points. I mean, we don't know if we're going to be funding a reactive response or a proactive response. We don't know if we're going to be funding a fund that won't be touched till 2040 or something that will be touched before 2040.
Yeah, true. I mean, we were trying to kind of just break it up a little bit and bring it back and spend the next meeting on the what to fund. I know this committee had, in the past talked about wanting to be more proactive than reactive, but of course that's still up for discussion. We certainly can put it that way. Either way, whatever it is we're funding, it's true. We can come up with a target, or we still have to figure out where those funds would come from, right? Regardless.
Yeah, and then just one
And
note.
whether it's, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, just one note on the ERU. I thought they were only charging an additional $3 basically, because the $8 and some cents was their operating budget, and then it went up to $11.89.
Right.
So if we're talking, so if you want to emulate the rate, it's not 12 times 12 times 3,500. It's just $3 times 12 times 3,500.
It's $3, right? It was $3 for the first year, and then $1.41, and then $1.40, $1.40 for each of an increase each year. It was still a proposed increase, though.
And at the end of 10 years, you're at $25.
Correct. At the end of the 10 years, you're at a proposed ERU of $25 per.
Right, which was only a couple dollars more than the normal ERU rate increase without the resiliency fund.
Correct.
That's what I looked at from the chart.
Right. And so by the end of the 10 years, they were accumulating that additional $1.50 $1.50 it generates $5 million a year specifically for the Resiliency Fund. Oops, sorry. And here I can, sorry, wrong screen. I'm going to share it again just so you could see. There you go. Right. So current ERU in each year, and the years are listed on the side here. This is the proposed increase each year, starting out with $3.09 and ending at $1.50 in 2026. Total proposed ERU is $25, and then this was the amount for the accumulation. John? Anne-Marie.
I just forgot to put my hand down.
Fair enough. Tom?
I think the only thing I just want to point out is that their ERU is very similar to what BPW charges in that it has nothing to do with frontage on a street that has drainage, because stacked units or multifamily housing. But that was it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so do we want to proceed talking a little bit about other sources of funding? I mean, we can decide whether we, oh, sorry, Keena, go ahead. You're in the corner of my eye.
Thank you. Dancing around the last two sets of discussion, recognizing that Coral Gables population was 50,000, so obviously it's going to have a whole lot more units than what we do. I was wondering, are there any other communities that might have funding that might be smaller, something more comparable to Lewis that we could perhaps explore that might have resiliency funds? I think we got a lot of ideas from Coral Gables and different ways that we could approach it, but I would like to see how a smaller population handles it.
Okay, that's a thought. I mean, we have, obviously we have Bethany Beach. They were going to come today. They weren't able to make it. And so they'll come and talk to hopefully at our March 8th meeting. And obviously some of the larger cities that I sent you the articles that we had to deal with, but it really, I think with the time, we can look to see if there's some more smaller communities, but I think still the structure is going to have to reflect what Lewis wants to see, what you're willing to pay and what you're willing to fund.
Sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, there's lots of differences. I mean, Coral Gables water comes from below ground. They don't have oceanfront. But regardless of those things, it's a model. And, our vulnerability is going to be very different than any other communities. And we need to do what's right for Lewis.
Sure.
So.
Correct. Okay. So let me bring up another, in regards of sticking with our potential sources of revenue, right? So we just talked about, the Coral Gables model with the stormwater fee. And these are ones the planning team, we just basically, brainstormed, and plus some of the articles that we saw, the idea of real estate transfer taxes and accommodations tax, similar to what Sussex County does, the real estate property tax increase, which is what Bethany Beach uses, building permit fees, kind of what Jim was saying, building on an existing fee structure. The article that I forwarded from Virginia Beach, they passed a bond for $470 million for specific projects. So it's a little different. And then Boston, of course, right now is looking at the concept of a developer impact fee within a certain area of their waterfront. So obviously, when we look at funding, we can look at one source. There can be multiple sources. Maybe some of these resonate with you all, maybe some of them don't, or a preference. And maybe there's something we're missing here completely. So are there any reactions to other sources of funding, or do we like the idea of the stormwater fee? Jim, go. I saw your hand first, sorry.
Yeah, I think one other area you could put on there is a percentage of any type of surplus the city has, if they have a surplus.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyone else? Anything else missing? Marta?
I've heard, I guess there's a property tax increase already being considered. Is it Sussex County or city or both? And if so, what would those funds be used for? Not this, of course, right?
The Sussex County has their Resilience EX fund, and that is an accommodations tax. I'm not sure if you're talking about that or something different.
No, I think I heard that, maybe it's statewide, property taxes need to increase, and there's some talk about it happening, readjusting how they even charge property tax.
Right, the real estate business, basically. Right. Yeah, which is a whole other topic.
Yeah, but it would influence whether you want to use property tax increase or not to fund even more. Okay.
No.
I think what was thought of in the property tax, it would be, a Lewis regenerated tax that would be, possibly But that hasn't been discussed at all. But that is a possibility.
Tom, I see your hand up. I wasn't sure if it was to you.
Yeah, I just want to bring us back. One of the other key things that Coral Gables said was they were part of a 4-county working group that was forecasting sea level rise, precipitation, and heat indexes out to the year 2100 as the basis for the use of these funds. And I know this group has previously, not moved forward on with any of the impacts due to sea level rise or precipitation, and is focused on the disclosure and this resiliency fund. But in my mind, a resiliency fund, unless we understand what we want to become resilient from a meaningful, realistic perspective, not historic, is going to leave this town greatly at risk. So the funding mechanisms are great, and I'm all, we can consider them. But, going back to, I think Jim Baker had said in the beginning, what are we planning for? And I'm still not sure that we're going forward with anything to city council as to what we're planning for.
Sure. Well, and again, I think similar to what we did with the real estate disclosure, we're not looking to iron out all of the details. We're looking at a framework of what that is. And we can absolutely have that discussion. Phil, I saw your hand fly up and down. I don't know.
Yeah, no. Go ahead, Tom.
I'm not sure that, throwing this on city council's lap is what we were charged with, but I'll shut up.
So I'll just add that, what would this be for? And I'll just go back to what Coral Gables, they use theirs for. They don't know. State and federal programs get changed all the time. New sources of grants fund different things depending on what's happening. And they don't know what federal grants are going to look like in 2050, but they do know that they will require a match, that municipalities, jurisdictions will have to contribute something, have some skin in the game. And so they don't know what it will be exactly. They just know they're going to need to break the piggy bank at some point. So I just add that for context. It is important to say, what are we going to fund specifically? But their approach is, we don't really know. And that's okay. They're comfortable with that approach, right?
And Phil, I'm okay with that approach, but they also are putting in the boundary of, and we're planning for 2100 with sea level rise and precipitation increases. Planning, just putting a pool of money aside, and many, many other communities, whether it's New York, Virginia Beach, Boston, all have done things to say, we're adopting the 500-year floodplain, or we're doing this or that to mitigate what the funds that we will need in the future will be. And that's the part that I see missing from what we're doing, is we're putting money aside, and I understand it can be for matching funds, for bonding, for whatever, but we're not doing anything in the near term to mitigate that money, with that money, the amount of money that we will need in the future. And without mitigation, I think we're missing the boat.
So I'll just add one final thing. The mitigation piece, Tom, if there's time, there will be additional opportunities, I would imagine, for the city of Lewis to work on those things in the interim. But
Right.
You're absolutely right. Those mitigation measures, at this point in this committee, we are at the Resiliency Fund and the real estate disclosure.
Right.
And I understand that.
Yeah.
And going back, 4 years ago, we started the Sea Level Rise Commission. And so we're 4 years down the line of lost time in the measures. I will stop.
I saw Jim's hand and Joe Kelly's hand.
Go ahead, Joe.
Well, Tom, I know it's not within our, it's not within our remit, but it's obvious to me that we should evaluate what matching funds may be necessary to restore our beaches, because when you look at this latest report from the intergovernmental panel on climate change, it's obvious we're going to have more storms, more erosion, and I know that we have Tony Pratt, I forget his last name.
Attorney Pratt.
Looking into getting funding, but is Lewis itself going to need funding to deal with what would seem to me be maybe a constant need to take remedial steps at the beach? We're spending a lot of time about ferrying people to the beach, but there may not be that much beach left in certain areas unless there's funds set aside to deal with the impacts of future sea level rise and climate change.
Jim and then Marta.
Yeah, so the way that I kind of envision this, and please let me know where I'm wrong, but I feel like it should be a combination of a little bit of both, where we set aside a certain, well, let me back up real quick. One thing I really liked about Coral Gables and the Resiliency Fund is they are in a very good financial position to secure any type of funding that they need to secure because they have a resiliency fund. I think that helps them in the future, come 2040, if they have a $500 million expense that they need to dedicate for some resiliency project, they're in a good financial position to do that because they have the $100 million. So the way that I envision this fund is to put Lewis in a good financial position in order to tackle these issues. I envision this fund being, collecting as much as it can for the first 5 years or 10 years. And then have something stated where a certain percentage of the fund can therefore be spent on grants, to Phil's point, grants that pop up, that are good opportunities to help mitigate sea level rise. We don't have to wait another 20 years to start doing some of the smaller things that do have an effect. So can we start a fund by funding for the first 5 years or 10 years or whatever it is, and then from that point forward, have a clause in that fund that states there's a maximum percentage that can be utilized at the council's discretion for these matching type grants while you're still building the fund each year.
It's possible.
So Jim's proposing basically a combination of both, kind of short-term building of mitigation funds and then long-term building of grant and kind of that reserve fund. How does the committee feel about that? Any reactions? Any yes, no, no way?
I think I like the longer term thing that was described for Coral Gables, but I don't know enough about it yet to really be adamant about that. I just think we're gonna need a lot of money at a certain point later down the road. And if we use it all up, matching funds, in the meantime, we won't have as much. So I don't know.
Anyone else? Kina, your hand's up. Is that a separate discussion? I want to stay focused here for a minute, but I don't.
It overlaps with this.
Okay.
It overlaps with this. One of the things that Coral Gables said that 25% of that went towards the disaster fund. Do I remember that correctly?
No, the 25% was on their existing operating budgets.
Okay.
So the stormwater fee was on top of that, and a percentage of it went to maintenance, regular maintenance, and then the increases went to the Resilience Fund.
Okay.
So there were three different funds, really.
I think Tim makes some really good points. I was looking at it as, kind of like preventive maintenance and being proactive. I think we do need the combination of the two. One of the things, well, never mind. I'll come back to this if it comes up.
Okay.
Okay.
We have just a couple minutes left in today's meeting. I do want to, respect everybody's time since we didn't, we moved the time and all of this. So, but I do ask that, I'll forward the spreadsheet from Coral Gables, and if there's specific questions, please send them to me, and I'm happy to talk with Matt and Keith and clarify them. But in the meantime, just ask that we keep thinking about this and kind of have that answer in terms of what your comfort levels are, in terms of what the funding sources are, what the, is it completely long-term, no touch until a future date, or is there mitigation strategies, in the short term as well, kind of building to that, to Jim's point. Joe, did you have a closing comment or question?
Yeah, just one last comment. I don't know whether Phil has looked at resiliency funds in other jurisdictions, so we get a flavor of what other communities may be doing. I don't know whether.
Yeah, so we're going to hear, Jen shared some of the funding sources. So Bethany, they have a property tax increase to fund disaster relief post-disaster, right? Post-event. So that's their model, and you'll hear about that at the next meeting. Another model is Sussex County, for example. They have, they approved it right before the pandemic, but they haven't implemented it. It's an accommodations tax to fund green infrastructure projects in the county. But when the pandemic hit, they didn't want to add any additional fees onto accommodations because, for obvious reasons, right? So that's there. They just haven't pressed go yet and started to collect on it. But those are two alternatives, two different models. And then you've got Coral Gables that does the ERU for the long term. We don't know what yet, but break in case of emergency kind of situation.
What about beyond those three jurisdictions? And do we have any other examples that may be helpful to us?
So Jen shared Boston is looking at a developer impact fee. I don't know specifically what they are suggesting or what they will use that for. I think it's good to have these models, but then again, it's also each of these towns are different, right? Different sizes, they have different vulnerabilities, and so it's good to have these examples. And Lewis will have to pick the one that fits best for Lewis.
Okay.
Yeah. If we can prepare a table and basically an outline of the ones that we've had so far, just to kind of give you a summary. But there's more out there. You're on the forefront of a developing issue, right? I mean, if you Google Resiliency Fund, you're coming up with all kinds of cities who are taking all types of different approaches. Right. And so We can't exhaust that research because it's just emerging and ongoing. We're going to contribute to it, hopefully, in Lewis with our own model. So there's lots to think about, but we can put together a table and send that out so you have that,
Okay,
as a
thank you.
reference.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to assume there's no questions from the public, unless there is. And Marty, you had a last, and Keena both have hands up. Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I like the idea of the ERU, if it's stormwater related, why don't we generate a fund for that? We might want to think about lot coverage percentage in terms of making different ones, although I guess that can complicate things and it may be more difficult, but it's something to think about. And maybe a developer impact fee could be added to that as well. I don't know. We have a lot of development coming in, right?
Okay. Considerations. And Keena.
One thing that crossed my mind when they presented the table, and probably helped them to sell it, because the fee of the $3 in this case that they added on, and as was pointed out, that rate went down. In other words, when Jim was talking about building it sooner, I thought that was a good idea. But I think to help sell it, if people know that the initial phase is to get this thing going and make an impact with it, and then reduce that cost. If they can see that, so many times our government imposes something on us and it just grows. I'm done.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. And again, I'll share those slides with you that they presented to us. So, all right. So our next meeting is on March 8th, where we continue this discussion and hopefully have Bethany Beach and come and present their version, their model of the emergency relief fund. And in the meantime, please send any questions. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jen and Phil. Okay.